Hello, my name is Todd Smith. I'm with Farotech. I'm the VP of Partner Growth, and I am joined by Chris Carr. Chris is our CEO. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Everybody out there in YouTube video land, this is the Farotech podcast, and we have actually renamed it the Digital Marketing Masters Class. And the reason why we did that is largely because we've been in the industry so long that we feel like educating our clients is like the number one priority. So Chris and I are both in sales, but a lot of times our sales calls are really focused on educating the client, telling them about the environment, telling them about, the search environment, the marketing environment, how it's changing, how the web is becoming critical to people's businesses. So a lot of our sales calls are really focused on educating the client and then finding a solution that works with the client. So Chris, thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Today's going to be a really cool topic because we're talking about SEO. Now, SEO, as you know, is a very broad word. It means a lot of different things to a lot of people, but really when you boil it down, it's obvious that getting on the first page of Google and any other search engine is really important. But what are the challenges, Chris? Like, what do you typically see with that right now?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that you have here is that even if you could do this in a way that is perfectly in line with Google's best practices and things like that, what you're running into is the fact that Google literally is changing the algorithms. Like, they used to announce really big changes. Now they happen literally every day. We have a piece of software called Mozcast. It's literally like a weather report, and it finds out literally how often are they changing the dials with SEO. Because, if you knew that it was a level ground and you could trust where, what you're doing today is going to be valuable tomorrow, you know what I mean? Like, you could start to chart your course. But when you realize that it's a moving target, it's just really, I don't know how to describe it, but you need to invest in SEO, but you also got to be very conscious that this is a wild beast that can get out of control and that there's no guarantees. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that you have is just, you need to know that you and I don't own Google. You know what I mean? It's like, it's their world. We're just living in it.
Definitely. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's going to be really important. And I think that a lot of companies that get into the SEO game just kind of, for the first time, in other words, they hire an SEO agency or they try to dabble in it themselves. They think it's like a light switch that you can just turn on, and it's really not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. You were talking about how, like, a lot of our customers, they have marketing departments. So unless they necessarily have someone who's dedicated to the task of understanding like the algorithm changes and then understanding how that changes from a day-to-day basis, it's really difficult to stay on top of it.
And I think one of the things, you and I were just talking about, Todd has a sales call with a client, and, they feel like they're doing fairly well in SEO. Their search traffic is, it's okay. Could obviously be a whole lot better, but like kind of uncover what we were just talking about in relation to branded and unbranded search. Because I think, I think that someone could say, hey, you know what, we're doing really well. And it's like, but are you? Do you know your numbers?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's one of the reports that we'll run, and it will show the difference between branded and not branded search. So just for any of those who don't know out there, branded search basically implies that your brand name or your company name is actually in the keyword, and non-branded is it would not be. So if you were searching for, say, like a webcam, and then you search Logitech, Logitech would be the brand, and then that would be one of their keywords, and they might say like 1080p or HD or something like that. But if you just search like high def webcam, that's the non-branded, and that, for the most part is difficult because people look at their keywords and they flood them with their own branded content, not realizing that there's a whole universe out there of keywords that they're not really hitting on. And then what we do is we have the software that we can run that for our customers, point that out, and then get them to expand their ability to find these people and attract them to their website.
Yeah, because I think when you think about it, it's like Mr. Client says, well, we actually have really high search volume. And I'm like, well, if they're mentioning your name, you know what I mean? If they're mentioning your name, we already know you exist.
Yeah, right.
So the chances of you getting that sale are very good anyway.
Anyway,
so your search didn't really help too much, maybe if you have multiple locations or something.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if they know your brand, you're 80%
already found you
there anyway. So, I think good search should be measured on these are the people that found you that didn't even know you existed.
Yeah.
They had a problem and they needed a solution, and your solution just happened to fit their query.
Yep.
And if you don't look at SEO that way, I'm going to be the first one to say your brand is very important.
Right.
But in the search game, you need to know your numbers well enough to say, hey, when I take my name out,
what's left?
Does my visibility just plummet?
Totally. Yep. Yeah. So like we'll run reports for people, and a lot of times we'll see that mix like 90-10, so 90% branded, 10% non-branded. And for the most part, it looks good or it might sound good, but really what we help clients figure out is like, you're missing a lot of opportunities, so we like that percentage to be a little more closer to the midpoint, like maybe a 50-50 or like a 60-40. And once again, I mean, anybody that's in the search business knows that it's a long game. You're not going to basically, like you said before, you can't just flip a switch and then all of a sudden, oh, my search is fantastic tomorrow. It's one of those things that, not only you have to be in for the long haul, but then you also have to do like a lot of testing, because there might be some words that, you literally cannot rank for because it's just so difficult or so cost prohibitive. And that's why you have to really become an expert and a pro at really understanding, how to attack that. Before we go any further, I wanted to ask you a question before we get too far down the road here.
Yeah.
So I kind of drew the high line on SEO, but like what are the types of SEO? Like, what does that look like?
Well, let me share my screen real quick.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do here, let me just, whoops. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Let me know when you can see it.
Got it.
Okay. So, I mean, when I'm talking about SEO strategy, there's a lot that goes into that. Everything from what you do on your website to what you do off the website, off your website. But like a lot of the things that what I'm looking to do is to understand, do I need to compete locally, or do I got to compete what I call nationally or internationally or organically? Because your approach is going to change because they're two different sciences. And I'm going to go into that. I think what happens here is that a lot of people will spend a lot of time and energy on one thing. Because I know a lot of SEO companies that come in and they fix your website and they think that the 25% that they're doing on on-page SEO and the 15% they're doing on setup is SEO. And I can't say it's not, but I mean, there's a whole lot
It's
left.
just not the whole picture.
You know what I mean? It's just, you're looking at, a pretty decent amount that's left, and so if you're not committing to content and you don't know how to do backlinking, that's going to be a serious problem. But when I'm thinking about local SEO, what I'm really looking at is that you have these local pin packs. A lot of those are really based upon your geography, and there's a science for that. And then there's also a different science for organic SEO. And I think you got to know both if you're going to be in certain industries that need to capitalize on critical keywords, but also people that are trying to find things that are in their local region. When I talk about local SEO, every single year Moz puts out, it's sort of like the critical ranking factors that you're going to need to do to get into those pin packs. And we share this report with our clients. And so if you're watching this video and you want this information, please feel free to contact us. I'll be happy to send you this report. But one of the critical things I want to do for local SEO is I want to know, hey, you know what? What is going into, what are the critical factors that's going into local SEO is understanding that every directory that you need to be on has to have consistency with this thing called NAP. And with NAP, what we're really talking about is your name, address, and phone number. And so what happens is that we're going to generate these reports, and it's going to identify what directories are you on, how consistent is your NAP, and then how quickly can we correct that? Because we have software that can clean up all of these directories all in, all of 10 to 15 minutes.
So why don't people see that as important, Chris?
A lot of people just don't know that they have these errors.
So it's kind of an awareness thing.
It's definitely an awareness thing. The directories that you have, the directories that are on this list are one of basically the directories never asked for your permission to be on those directories. Right. They scraped Google or they scraped something. And then it's your job to go and correct or clean that up. And so few people do. Now, what you're going to notice on some of those directories is it's saying like, hey, like Judy's book or something like that. You might be thinking, no one goes to Judy's book to find out my company. You know what I mean? But why you want to be on those, why you want to clean up your brand on those directories is because those are expectations from Google that you are going to have a consistent branding across all these directories. And when you do the effort to clean that up, it's going to increase your domain authority. When it increases your domain authority, keywords are ranked bigger.
I am so glad you said that, right? Because that's one of those words that's just sort of could be a little nebulous. So the term that Chris just said was domain authority. And it's one of those things. It's kind of like a report on how much authority your domain has or ranks with Google. So from an aspect of domain authority, a newer site, doesn't have the authority that an established site with a lot of backlinks, a lot of traffic has. So it takes time to gain authority. So Chris, can you just sort of unpack what that looks like? Like how do you play the authority game? So let me just back up real quick. Like, is that something that we talk to our clients about and we say, look, your authority it's on a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being the highest, so your authority is like an 18 or a 19. Typically like that, we see customers that are doing well in that like 40 to 60 range. And then obviously some of the higher end ones are, in that like 80 to 90 range. So is that something that when we talk to our customers, we say, look, we address the issue of authority and then we put a strategy together to increase the authority over time?
Yep. Let me walk through both of those. Okay. When we talk about domain authority, a good friend of mine who kind of taught me about SEO would call it trust rank, which is essentially the idea, the concept of have you earned the right to be heard in the eyes of Google?
Sure. Okay.
We also used to talk about this like analogy of like a lunch table. And it was like, you could be a total dork, but if you're sitting at the cool kids lunch table, you're like kind of like cool by association.
Your stock just went up.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much the only reason why girls would even talk to me in high school. Like, it's not me that's cool. It's literally the people I'm sitting with. And so if I can get some of their street cred,
you'll take it.
And as you can see, it didn't get me very far. But that, if you take the idea, the concept of, if I have a website and I have websites that are not owned by me that point links back to mine, it's going to increase my authority.
Sure.
And so like not all backlinks are equal. Those are called backlinks, but they're not all equal. Like for example, I could have 1,000 backlinks from other websites that point to my website. But if they have low authority or specifically lower than mine, it's only going to help a smidge.
Incrementally.
I can take that same 1,000 backlinks, and if Microsoft just did one backlink to us, our authority would go way, way up because Google basically ranks the people that backlink to you. Like we have a new client coming on, and I don't want to mention names, but they're 6 months old, and we looked at their domain authority and we're like, oh my gosh, that's really, really great. Like, what are you doing with SEO to do that? And then we like looked at their stuff. We're like, well, you're not writing content and you're not doing all that stuff. And we're like, man, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden, like we're talking to them, we're looking at their backlink report and they're like, oh, by the way, we're in Walmart. Oh, by the way, we're in Amazon. We're in Alibaba. We're in all these things. And we're like, there it is.
There you go.
There it is.
Yep.
Like you have really high domain authority.
Gotcha.
The problem is just because you have high domain authority doesn't mean you have the next ingredient that I'm going to be talking about. And that is developing content.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So let me go back. I'm going to share my screen one more time.
So real quick for our viewers, obviously, search rank takes a long time, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But like how quickly can somebody change their domain authority?
Yeah. Well, it really depends on, again, if I get a really great backlink.
Okay.
If I get a really great backlink, it can be very quickly. But
so it can be quick. Okay.
Yep. The parts that I'm talking about is the long game. And what I mean by that is that you can't control other people that link to you.
Yep.
But what you can control is your own content. And so let me kind of break that down.
Sure.
So we do this Philadelphia SEO analogy because we're from Philadelphia and we're very used to the skyline here. And so what happens here is that most companies always want to rank for these really big keywords. These are keywords that drive a ton of volume to your website. And I would want them too. The problem is that they're often usually very broad, but we'll go into that in a little bit. But one of the things that I'm mentioning here is that we're going to help you look for keywords that have really high visibility, but with less difficulty and less competition because what I want to be able to do is not try to put all my time and energy in getting a keyword and then all my competition wants that same keyword. And now we're in a wrestling match. I'd rather find keywords that they don't even know exists. And what I mean by that is that we look for these things. They're called VOD keywords. They're a form of long tail keywords, because what we have uncovered is that the large majority of your competition, that are always searching for that top 10,000 keywords.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that the majority of people are all competing for that same 20% of overall search traffic. But what we're able to do is we're able to say, hey, you know what? 70% of the search traffic can actually come to these long tail keywords that are highly specific. They're usually 4 to 6 word phrases. But the thing is, though, is that because they have low competition, I'm able to gain more what I'm going to call real estate. More real estate, bigger, stronger, and faster than my competition, because I'm going after these words that they didn't even know existed.
And that, by doing that strategy,
Yep.
like the underlying reason for that is basically to increase your domain authority.
Yep, because I'm looking for that tipping point.
Right.
And the tipping point essentially is the idea. Oh man, it's a terrible time for my screen to go fuzzy. Hopefully you understand.
I can kind of read it.
Yep.
Tipping
so
point.
What I'm looking for is the tipping point.
Trust me.
I want to increase that authority to be in a scenario where I've earned the right to be heard for Google. My domain authority has gone up. Google trusts me. So now when I want to go after these bigger keywords, because I've earned the right to be heard, there's a significantly better chance of me getting bigger keywords when I try to go after that than I would if I had no authority whatsoever.
Okay. So just help me real quick, because I think this is really important when you talk SEO. How long does it take to rank?
Well, okay. Again, let's pretend like this isn't a vacuum and you have, you're going after keywords of certain sizes. And let me kind of unpack what I mean by that is that not all keywords are equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the things that I want to be able to do are know what kind of keyword am I going after? What authority do I have? If I have really high authority and I have the ability to go after really big keywords, that's going to change the speed. Okay. If I don't have authority, right? I'm sorry. If I don't have authority and I want to go after a big keyword, I might not ever get it. But if I have authority, even if I'm like the most popular person in the world, that doesn't mean I get the word that I want. Like, for example, like Neil Patel, this guy here is the godfather of SEO, at least in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Even with all the firepower that he has, these keywords that have high competition can take as long as a year to get.
Gotcha.
So what we try to do is we try to look for keywords that have low competition. And usually that's going to be 90 to 120 days. Okay. I remember back in the day that I could almost guarantee that I could get keywords to rank, VOD keywords to rank in 90 days. That's not even close anymore.
Really? Okay.
Now, it's, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
we're looking for that sweet spot for low and medium.
Yep.
Because I only have a few clients that have enough domain authority to go after those really, really big keywords.
So
we've helped companies develop the authority to be able to go for high, but very few companies we work with are able to go to these high competition keywords right out of the gate.
Gotcha. So when you say that, and I look at this slide, right, we're in this sort of immediate gratification type of society, right? Yep. So what's our process as a company? Like, how do we consult our customers in this type of a strategy? Because, I want to win quick.
I know.
Working with an agency, working with us, I mean, it's not cheap. It costs money. There's an investment. So that's what's our strategy? How do we talk to customers about, look, this is a long game that you're playing. It takes an investment. It takes consistency. It takes strategy. It takes A/B testing. It takes all this process, but you might not see results for at the earliest 90 to 120 days.
Yeah. And so what I try to do is I try to do a multi-pronged approach. So when I do SEO, I know it's going to take my first batch of keywords. It's going to take 120 days. Mm-hmm. A couple of things I don't do. I don't bet all, I don't put all my eggs in one basket and say, well, in 120 days, I'm going to rank. Right. I'm going to be able to pump out enough content that some could rank earlier than 120 days. Some will rank in 120 days, but it's about keeping as many irons in the fire. Okay. Because what you don't want to do is publish and pray. That's the big thing. Yeah. The second thing I want to do is I know, 120 days might be the difference between a client like tapping his foot and be like, dude, are you guys,
Come on.
is this ever going to pay off?
Seriously.
So
Yeah.
I tell them up front, I might need to add a page strategy for 90 days to 120 days to get my keywords on the first page of Google until my SEO catches up.
Okay.
I might send more email marketing out. I might go back to your existing client list and, you know, try to get people that are a little bit closer to the pin to, you know, to come to my website.
That makes sense.
One of the things that I might do is I might look at what keywords am I already ranking on in Google, but maybe I'm on page 2.
Yep.
Because the distance of going from page 2 to page 1 is very different than going from page infinity to page 1.
Gotcha. Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep, definitely. So if you sort of, and I think you kind of just touched on this, but if you had to sort of summarize, like, what's the secret ingredient to this whole SEO thing? Like, how would you do that?
Well, you know, I think a lot of what I'm trying to do is trying to say, there's a book called Good to Great. And with Good to Great, he talks about this flywheel. And what I try to do is I try to build a system for my clients, and SEO is one portion.
A part of the system. Right.
But if I'm talking about SEO, what's the secret ingredient? What I want to be able to do is I want to tighten up my website, get it airtight, make sure that that everything under my control is on lockdown, that it's consistent with best practices. Google recognizes it, and I know how to index, and I'm monitoring how well do I index.
Yep.
The second thing I want to do is I want to develop an editorial calendar so that I'm consistently creating content, that I'm putting multiple irons in the fire of keyword optimized content.
Gotcha. Okay.
Keep in mind, I didn't say just pump out content. I said keyword optimized content.
Right.
And then third, and this is the one that's really hard to do, is you want to be able to find ways to generate backlinks. Okay. Backlinks are the secret sauce that everyone talks about and they know about, but it's very hard to do. And everyone just does this blanket statement that says, hey, if I create quality content, people are going to link to me. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I've read really great content, but that doesn't mean I have my website available to me to go in and link to it. Like, in fact, it's kind of a big ask. So you have to find ways to work with a subject matter expert that knows how to get backlinks from these other authority websites to point back to your website. There's no silver bullet in that. In fact, people that try to find a silver bullet, they kind of cheat the system. They almost always get caught.
Gotcha.
You got to have a serious science and an art to find out how to develop and generate backlinks. And, you know, so that's one of those things where when my toilet leaks, I don't try to fix it myself. I just call a plumber. You know what I mean? That's the part of the SEO equation that you can try yourself, but you know, that's what separates a good agency from a bad agency, is saying, hey, you know what are you going to do to increase my authority? What are you going to do to get me backlinks? Okay.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you very much for your time. This was very informative, and I think we unpacked a lot of details, and hopefully we not only dispelled some myths out there, but we also, you know, provided some level of education. So thank you for your time, and viewers out there, thank you. And if you can, you need to do 3 things: like us, subscribe to us, and click on that notification bell, because we have a lot more content coming out, and keep us in mind. Thank you very much.
I think one of the things in parting as well is we talked about that local SEO report and that branded and unbranded report. If you want that, you can always reach out to us. Todd will probably even give you a call back independently and just say, hey, you know what, like this is your report, and this is not something that is a commitment that you have to buy from us. We just want to help you understand your own numbers. Yeah,
definitely. And that's really kind of, that's the first step, is really, I think we talked about that earlier. It's just awareness. Like, people just don't know, you know? So we make a major investment every month in software. And, you know, that's, it sounds like what you're saying is that we're offering to do like some free analysis for people if they're interested. Okay.
All right.